reform and its effects?
Well, I think it's also impacted by the times in which it was ratified and sort of established. It's also pandemic impacted. Yeah. So there's a lot of aspiration expressed in terms of the vision under the free trade agreement. But because of the scale being continental wide, there's a lot of footwork that goes into it. And I would say on that path, there has been, a lot has happened, but not necessarily reaching commerce and industry as yet, but in terms of frameworks and policy developments and national level conversations, that there's definitely traction in that space. But I would say that it is needed that it also reach the man on the street, and specifically seeing in countries where we have an informal sector of business, how that can boost and support entrepreneurship as one example.
And it's it's interesting that you're bringing in that point as well, because we have to play a big balancing act. I remember there was a conversation during the time when Minister Schlettwein was in charge of finance around how do we formalize the informal sector, how do we get them into the formal banking structure and system, so that we should be able to get our hands on some of those coins as well from a tax collection perspective, but also some pushback from the ordinary man on the street say, no, but let's leave the small and medium enterprises for now. Just talk to me about that balancing act. Even though you want to collect revenue, you also don't want to put too much pressure on small and medium enterprises to allow them to be able to use those funds for expansion.
Yeah, that's quite critical given the composition of our markets and our sector in that space. But interesting to note that one of the tax proposals with this year's budget speech tabled in February was the introduction of a reduced SME tax rate. So we take it that it's not been researched, there's not been enough stakeholder engagement, so it was not part of this first run of tax amendments that came through. So that is part of the conversation that excites and interests me, what part thereof will be mentioned today and what we can look forward to. Usually it comes in the form of more a revenue tax, which is on top level, which is easier to understand. So let's say you pay X percentage on revenue earned, so that alleviates or take away from the smaller business owner having to account for his expenditure. But what was announced is more a reduced existing corporate tax rate. And then what's also interesting to follow is what will then be classified as a SME in order to be eligible for this reduced tax rate. But it's definitely much needed, but with these usually taxpayer education campaigns is crucial, and also to make sure that the policy around it is not complex to follow and apply and understand.
Well, if you just joined us, very good afternoon to you and welcome. We are coming to you live from the courtyard of the August House, the National Assembly of the Republic of Namibia, where in the next few minutes the Minister of Finance will be tabling his midterm budget review statement. Of course, taking account of how the budget has been executed since the appropriation bill was passed earlier this year. We could quickly go for a short break. We have, of course, also gone to the streets of Windhoek to find out really what the expectations are from the constituents. Let's take a look.
Aligning the budget with what's happening on the ground, because a lot of times when the budget is being formulated in Parliament, they don't really address issues that people in rural areas are facing, like the lack of roads, infrastructure development, like a story like that took place in Rundu where the school is not connected to this main sewage system of the town. Those are the things that really people need urgent attention to. So I think maybe just better planning from the side of the government, and also maybe working on how they will implement these funds that are allocated to different ministries to make sure that the money is used for what it's meant to be used for and not returned next year again.
I think they have to review the budget so they can also see on healthcare, where especially in the rural areas, because there's a lack of healthcare in the rural areas, because they are mostly focusing on the development of urban areas and they are not seeing what's actually happening deep down in the rural areas. If they can have a task team or task force, they can go do research. I think they've been doing that, but is it effective enough? Is it effective enough to really see what are the major challenges the country is facing at the moment? Because at the end of the day, we want a Harambe country as well. So we need to really see on the healthcare aspect as well. Thank you.
With the 376.3 million that was allocated for education this year, I personally, as a student myself, don't think that budget is enough. I think that the budget should be increased when reinstated again, so that it stops the inconveniences that us students go through or have been going through the academic year of 2024. So with regards to NASFAF specifically in terms of the budget. So yeah, that's what I think.
As a citizen in Namibia, I feel like the budget reviews doesn't really cater to the homeless people out there. And like as a citizen, I feel like we should cater to them more, and based on the school budgets, because like based on most students are self-funded these days and not all of them have NASFAF, and I feel like they should also drop the points a bit so more students can get NASFAF. So the budget should also be allocated towards the NASFAF students and more towards the homeless people.
The government must also like cater for the hospital, because the hospitals right now don't have medicine, and people currently fall sick and then they only give medicine that don't really help. And there are also homeless people that need like food and also packages that the government can help us with or help the people with.
I think the budget should be more focused on the educational part of Namibia, due to there's a high rate of unemployment, and for the government to focus more on the educational part, this gives our Namibians the opportunity to get knowledge and the skills they need in order to get work, in order for our tax rates to lower themselves a bit, and in order for us as an
that really been beneficial to date?
So we have a bit of a diverse play out, but it has definitely been legislated and should be refunded. And exactly how and the timing, that's where we experience differences, where, for example, larger corporates could perhaps take it upon themselves and have that as a once-off tax refund. That was, let's say, most by the end of September, some now by the end of October. Can expect that good surprise. But others are also exposed to having to wait and being on what we say a tax holiday. So let's say between now and February, not being deducted pay as you earn, just to get to an equitable outlook again if there was a form of over deductions. So it's a bit different between the Namibians, and some might even have to wait when they file their return by June 2025. But what is key and is important is that there should be experienced an increase in disposable income. There's always discussions around this in terms of what it means for the broader economy.
The broader economy. Because, I mean, you can have disposable income, but it also matters how I spend that disposable income.
Yeah. And, Ricardo, what one also would like to see with that is that there is there's more of a social... more of a saving culture. Yeah, let me rephrase. More of a savings culture instead of just spending it, or perhaps repaying debt instead of just spending it. In terms of an increased demand for goods and services locally, which will happen, there is also the expectancy of inflationary impact again in terms of pushing prices up.
And with regards to that, particularly on the demand side of things, on the broader economy of that additional income.
An important indicator is today's conversation on expected value-added tax revenue, for example, because that speaks exactly to how much me and you consume of goods and services locally. So it might be states' expectancy that the VAT revenue for this fiscal year might come in much higher than budgeted due to that increased disposable income. Just the last remark on that will be that increases of this sort doesn't reach the unemployed, for example. So to the unemployed, relief is more granted where they, for example, have an experience of more food stuff being zero rated. And that we've not had in Namibia for a couple of years. So, yeah, so that is just some, the flip side of, so for the employed paying pay as you earn, definitely a good injection, but in terms of the unemployed but we also have in Namibia households where there is one or two individuals. I know some of them, you know some of them, that sort of carries the household. And if that person is a pay-as-you-earn paying individual, then at least in that household perspective, there is now a form of tax relief.
Well, talking about tax relief as well, also a phase reduction. We briefly mentioned it a bit earlier of corporate income tax from 31% to about 28% by the 2026-2027 financial year. We know, of course, from a business perspective, that's welcome news, but not always for the side of the revenue collecting agency now, as the numbers might be reducing. Just talk to us a little bit about that balance and the effect that, of course, also has on the local economy.
This should definitely support Namibia in terms of having Namibia more attractive in terms of investment decisions. If you just do a Southern Africa comparable, then much more, or not yet aligned, but closer to South Africa and Botswana corporate tax rates, for example. So from that perspective, definitely a good turn for the country. But against the backdrop of total tax revenue, corporate tax revenue has always been between 14 to 16% of total tax revenue.
So it doesn't move the needle as much?
At this stage, if we can expand the tax base, where, for example, we have an increased levels of entrepreneurship and more local business activity, if the unemployment can turn into business activity, for example, then that will also contribute to the taxes from our PTYs and our close corporations. And that in itself can lead to more tax revenue being collected. Also the attention that Namibia is getting from foreign investors, having them registered and then circling back to the sectors that are emerging and are growing. If, for example, circling back to the natural resource sector, if a lot of that can be taken up in terms of resource tax as well as royalty payments, then it's a total different conversation.
So it basically says in terms of what we are going to be doing to diversify our income streams going forward. But to what degree do you see this reduction improve corporate tax compliance? Is that even an issue in Namibia? Are we finding that score?
I think the attention that the tax incentive scheme, which is set to end this week, the attention that has been getting definitely proves that there is a historic compliance issue. So also, because coupled with NAMRA's establishment was also them migrating to the ITAS e-filing system. And with any system migration, you need data integrity. So the incentive scheme also, not just in terms of revenue collection, but also speaks to the efficiency with which the revenue agency can rely on that data.
Well, we're quickly going to continue across back to just give you some views. Also, from the streets, we know that the Minister of Finance has, in fact, arrived here at the August House, and we're going to be crossing over very soon to hear from him. But in the meantime, let's hear a little bit more from what the ordinary Namibian expects from this midterm budget review statement.
The government should concentrate more on the Ministry of Poverty Eradication, hence that Namibia is really living in a very interdimensional poverty state, should I say, and also looking forward to things such as implementing a basic income grant, which will help us to eradicate poverty in Namibia. And also, things like implementing the basic income grant will really help, not only eradicating poverty, but also like the youth in so many things, people from rural areas and such. And also on education, I think there is so much improvement that we need that the government can do with a budget on education, such as mostly in the rural areas. Those people really don't have the privileges or advantages we in urban areas do have, such as having sufficient classrooms or chairs to sit and all that.
The government should focus on the Ministry of Education. Especially you find schools in the Kunene region where the infrastructures are not well equipped to accommodate or for the students or learners that side. So I think if they focus also on Ministry of Education when it comes to infrastructure, textbooks and all those things, it will really mean a lot for a Namibian child, because that's a Namibian child's education.
Investing more money in factories. Like our raw material, most of them are going out of the country. And if they could do that, then that will improve our employment rate. That's what I think they must allocate more fund on those ones. Another thing maybe schools. That's one of, you find some classrooms in some school have plus minus 50 learners. So why can't they actually build schools, and we have a lot of teachers who are sitting at home, qualified teachers, don't have jobs. So education is also one of the most important sectors that they can invest into.
I actually propose that the focus should actually be on the youth, on the youth development. Surely there's a lack of sufficient resources regarding the youth initiatives. The other area that also needs a bit of improvement or more support is actually education. Because I mean, we keep on talking education is the power. Education, kids need to go to school. But I mean, we need to speak to with sufficient resources as well to ensure that equitable education is implemented.
Are the voices of ordinary Namibians and their expectations in terms of the midterm budget review statement that will be taking place in the next few minutes here at the August House. The man of the hour, the Minister of Finance and Public Enterprise, Honorable Iipumbu Shiimi, now joins me just to maybe give us some breaking news, perhaps, Honorable Minister, before you go in. Good afternoon and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. Of course, you will obviously hear the breaking news when I'm in the chamber. But just to give you a gist of what we are doing here today, the midterm budget is really an opportunity for us as government to review the budget we have tabled at the beginning of the year and see what emergencies cropped up during the year, so that we can deal with those emergencies, because emergencies cannot wait for the next financial year. So for instance, you know that we now have enough information about the gravity of the drought that requires more resources. So we'll have to allocate resources to the efforts to combat drought. So there are some other emergencies that we have to look at. It's not a new budget, it's basically a reallocation of resources to emergencies.
Of course, looking at this as well, just a brief reflection, I think, Honourable Minister, on the importance of this juncture within the annual year of government finance, and how important this sort of reflection is in the scheme of leadership and governance in general.
It's important on two scores. One, first of all, we are in the mid-year of the financial year, and therefore it's important to take stock as to how far did we go with regard to the implementation of the priorities that we funded with the budget, so that we can, if we are falling behind on some areas, we can up our games. Yeah, that's one. The second thing is, as I said before, is to understand what are the areas of priorities that need more resources. Because when you remember, when you are budgeting for the future. You don't know exactly what is going to happen during the year. So now that we are half a year through, so we have more information about things that urgently need resources, and therefore this is an opportunity for us to address those priorities.
We know generally that the government budget cycle runs for about 3 years with the midterm expenditure framework. Even if you do a midterm review of this nature, how much flexibility or room do you have to maneuver with the reallocations?
Well, we don't do, this is not another budget, so we don't budget twice in a year. We only budget once in a year. And therefore we mustn't look at the midterm as another budget. The midterm is basically a review of where we are and a review of priorities, of emergencies. Otherwise, the budget will remain the same as it was tabled in February this year. But things that cannot wait, unfortunately, will have to be funded, and therefore we'll see where do we have resources that were not that were allocated at the beginning of the year, but are not going to be spent, so that we can reallocate those resources to the needy areas. So it's not a new budget. It's a reallocation when there are additional resources to fund those priorities and those emergencies.
Honourable Minister, please let me release you now to get into the chamber so that we can get the details around your statement. Thank you so much for making time out to join us.
You're welcome, and thanks for having me.
Honourable Minister of Finance of the Republic of Namibia, Iipumbu Shiimi, they're just reflecting a little bit, just a precursor of what we can expect, and just explaining the importance of the process of the midterm budget review and why we are taking that exercise as a government. Chantal Hazaman from PwC is still joining us. Well, the Minister was here just now. Basically echoed what you had said a little bit earlier on with regards to the review aspect and the reallocation of that. Of course, re-emphasizing that it's not a new budget. We are not tabling two budgets in 1 year, but rather just review and re-looking that as well. What can you tell from his engagement? He didn't really give us much there, but still looks optimistic.
Yes, definitely between a rock and a hard place, because he's about to table the midterm budget speech. but definitely also setting us off as a gentle reminder in terms of the importance of having this process, in terms of steering the country through a fiscal year, and also the importance of focusing on where attention should be redirected. So also just that we only have one budget, as the Honourable Minister said, but also that the budget is it's a live document. It's our reality, and it should be expressed as such.
Well, you were talking about, and I think that's what I perhaps also want to close off with, around public education on the national budget, its function. We know generally, of course, there was a financial literacy program that was run by government, but more to do with how to manage your domestic finances, etc., etc. But just a brief reflection in terms of what we can still do more to improve on that public education aspect, and the importance of us as part of our civic participation as Namibians to be involved in this process.
Very important question that you bring up, Ricardo, and I think there's layers to it as well, in the sense that it should start definitely at school level, and if one can, the easiest if you align it with in terms of personal spending, then it's very easy, it's easier to grasp and understand on a national level in terms of national public spending. Also, how structured and inclusive is this in terms of students, and not just per se students that is in commerce and industry, for example, but also for all graduates to enter the Namibian workforce having a certain level of understanding as to how state revenue is financed and governed, and the importance of the conversation around that. So it's definitely a joint effort between the public sector as well as the private sector. For example, does companies allow and support their employees in terms of following the conversation? There's very interesting ways to go about. For example, if there's debating opportunity, as well as to make sure that from NAMRA's side, there's also, and I am positive and know that it is high on their agenda, to make sure that they can just accelerate on those efforts to create awareness, bring the necessary education through, and just uplift the tax morale of Namibians. And
I think they've been doing quite well. I mean, if you look at the Namibia Revenue Agency and a lot of the work that they've been doing around public education there as well. But you brought in an interesting angle around education, saying that, look, perhaps it must be a chat that happens at high school level as well already. But with university now, we know at tertiary level there are some fundamental programs such as the Contemporary Social Issues module, yes, or the English for academic purposes. Perhaps one that also looks at the issues around state revenue, how it functions, and more so around civic and political participation.
Yes, definitely. Those are much needed activity. Not saying that there isn't happening, because I do know about activity that is run by, let's say, the accounting associations of our local universities, but it should be broader than those that studying the field of accountancy, for example. It's especially that dissect of students in other courses, in order to make sure that there's an increased understanding, and also increased efforts in terms of including students. For example, good to know if there are students present at the delivery of the budget today is one example.
In terms of just the general confidence, I think one of the important factors that we know when we are running a government and running a state is that there must be public confidence in order for me to be able to give the pay over the tax without having any qualms or without trying to avoid tax payment and so forth. What is your sense around just Namibians' general confidence in terms of how the revenue is being managed, and that continuous or raising of that confidence for us to continue supporting our public purse?
I think it's definitely an upward trend since the establishment of the Revenue Agency, but coupled with that is also the ability to have online filing. So there's still some teething problems, but that's technical teething problems. The principle behind it is the convenience and the oversight and the insight that it gives, in terms of there's no more excuse of it's difficult to find the time to go to the Revenue Agency and file a return, where you can conveniently do it or have somebody do it on your behalf if you have a laptop and internet access. So that's definitely, and also the instant, without working hours, you can also have oversight as to your affairs on ITAS. So there's definitely a significant improvement, which should boost the confidence in terms of submitting taxes. And coupled with the conversation of having dissects and conversations like today, if there's more open conversation on the spending side, so that fiscal prudence can also prevail.
Well, for now, we'll be crossing over in the next few minutes to the chamber. Let's quickly go for a short visit to the marketplace, and then I'll take you in to hear from your Minister of Finance and Public Enterprises. Stay with us.
quorum. There's no quorum. There's no quorum. There's no point. Asebu, please. In terms of today, we're supposed to start with the tabling of additional appropriation bill, and the rule dictate that we must be 49. Unfortunately, we are not at that level. So in terms of rule 115 sub 1, I adjourn the House till tomorrow, because this I don't want advice from anyone. But because this week is meant just for appropriation bill. So the House is adjourned due to the lack of quorum till tomorrow, 14:30. I hope by then we will be 49. Okay? Yeah? Yes. I don't know.
Well, welcome back. We're still coming to you live all the way from the August House, the courtyard of the August House, where we were, of course, expecting today the midterm budget review statement to be tabled by the Minister of Finance. Unfortunately, the session could not go on due to the House not meeting the required quorum of about 49 members of Parliament, excluding, of course, the presiding member or the Speaker for that day. I'm now joined by Ms. Lydia Kandetu, the Secretary to National Assembly, to just basically speak to us around what the standing rules are saying around this sort of thing happening, and of course what the next steps would be on this case. Secretary, thank you so much for making time out to join us this afternoon.
Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you for having me.
Well, a little bit earlier on, we were jokingly saying that we hadn't actually scheduled an interview with you today, but unfortunately we had to bring you on to just basically explain to the nation in terms of what has transpired. Perhaps you can take us through this requirement around the quorum.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. In fact, what happened today is it's not good at all. It should not happen, but it happened.
Is it the first time that especially for an event,
yes,
a calendar event such as this one?
Yes, it's from my recollection, it's the first time. This was a very special session of the midterm budget review, tabling, by the Minister of Finance. This was something, very special that we have arranged. And as you could see from the program is running up to Thursday. So this was just, to allow, the process, to continue so that we could approve, the midterm budget review. What happened today is that, as you know, as per the rules, Parliament is supposed to sit at 2:30, 14:30. But we have been waiting out there, looking at the time, because the rule 115 is saying that, especially for this, budget review, a special session, you wait for 30 minutes, and then, the presiding officer should take the floor and adjourn the House. So you were sitting here, and you were hearing how the bell was rang. It went on, for several times. We went even above the hour that was given, the half an hour that was given. And at 3 o'clock, we went in with a presiding officer who happened to be the Deputy Speaker. And she took the floor as by the rule, and she has also explained what the rule is saying. And she adjourned the House as it should be. So she adjourned the House until tomorrow, as you can remember.
In terms of the numbers that are required, can you just take us through the requirements for the quorum? How many members are needed to form the quorum? Is there a requirement for voting versus non-voting members to be present?
Yeah. In normal circumstances, we have a quorum of 26 members. That is the working quorum. We call it the working quorum. But then when there must be a decision, like now today, it's a bill. So there was supposed to be a decision after the minister has read, his speech. There was supposed to be a decision taken for us to move on. For that purpose, we were supposed to have 49 members as the voting quorum. So we could not get that. We had only 39. And so we have waited to see whether we could get the other 10. Unfortunately, it was not possible. So, and the time is ticking, and the rule is a rule, and it's our rule, so we have to adhere to the rule as well.
From an administrative perspective, are there any requirements from the side of the members of parliament to perhaps alert the parliamentary secretariat if they are not coming for sessions, or is that something which gets handled internally at party level by the different political parties represented in Parliament?
Yes, at party level, as you know, we have chief whips or whips at all the parties. If a member is not coming, they will alert the chief whips or the whips of that party that the member is not coming, and it is then sent to the secretariat. And but for today, we did not have so many members, that have asked for permission that they are not going to attend the parliament for today, then if we knew, then we could have not said. So we were just waiting for members to turn out. And
so under normal practices, usually if they are not coming, they would inform the whips, and then the whips will inform the secretariat to see whether the numbers will actually add up to convene in the first place. And that didn't happen.
Yeah, no, it didn't happen. So we are hoping that tomorrow we will have the required number. And we are hoping that this is taking place honestly, because it's very, very important, for the country at large.
So under normal circumstances now, in terms of this event, from the administrative perspective, what would be your next steps now? Are you going to speak to the chief whips to ensure that there is a quorum tomorrow? Or is it a matter of us coming tomorrow to see whether the members of parliament actually show up?
No, my staff member have started already to do that. We are busy speaking to the different whips to see whether we will get now, a number, which we think, the number will be possible. So by tomorrow morning, we know that we will inform the speaker that it is possible. We can sit, we have this number. Yeah.
Well, just in conclusion from our side as well, of course, we know that elections are coming up in the next month. In terms of the sitting and the calendar of Parliament, how does it look at this stage? When are you planning on taking a recess?
In fact, we were supposed to be on recess already. As I said earlier, that this is a special arrangement that we made for the budget review. In normal circumstances, they were supposed, we were supposed to go up to November, but the year of the election, it's never taking place up to November. By October, they should be on recess already. So that is why we had, to call them back for this special session, only for 4 days, and then they can go back again. Yeah.
In conclusion, any last message to the Namibian nation, to our viewers?
Yeah, to the viewers, we are very, very sorry that, this session could not take place. We were looking forward also from the side of the Secretariat to have this session, because we need to do this so that the country have money, wherever the need arise, and for them also to see how much money has been allocated, to different ministries and OMAs. So this is very, very important. We are just hoping that things will go right tomorrow, and we are not going to disappoint them. That is all that I can say. But they can still, be at their TVs and radios and listen to the Minister of Finance tomorrow, what he's going to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lydia Kandetu, the Secretary to the National Assembly, for just making time out and, of course, explaining to us a bit earlier on. Watershed moment, one of the first time, in fact, in the history of these sittings, particularly for calendar events, that no quorum has been reached here at Parliament. Expecting about 49 members, but in the end, only 39 present here, about 10 members still missing for them to be able to reach the quorum to allow the Minister of Finance to table the mid-term budget review statement. That is, of course, legally. But on that note, I think that brings us also to the end of the program for this afternoon here at the Tinted Palace. What we'll do is we'll be back tomorrow once again to, of course, bring you the tabling of that statement. That is, of course, if there is a quorum reached at the end of the day. And we'll know by 3 o'clock tomorrow, as the Secretary mentioned, that the sessions are expected to start at 2:30, and there's a 30-minute window to wait for members of Parliament to arrive in order for that quorum to be met. On that note, I'm Ricardo Knagosep from myself and the rest of the production team here. It's bye-bye.